Breaking the Ice with Rosemary Amber.
I pay my respects to our elders, both past, present, and the future leaders of our First Nation communities across Australia. We are recording on Majanji country, Babinda, Queensland. Welcome back to Breaking the Ice. I have Wynetta Dewis, known as Netta to me. Our connection is that we raised in Babinda. We connect with each other, not only a friend, as family, and it's wonderful to have you back again, Netta.
Thank you for inviting me onto your broadcast. And just with about growing up, in Babinda, as Rosie mentioned, we schooled together. We also spent some time playing sports together, the local basketball competition.
Yeah.
And and she called me by my name. A lot of the locals know me as by Netta. I'm glad you didn't call me Winnie, because that was the other name that people used to call me by as well, Winnie.
Yeah.
But we've got a lot of history in Babinda, and I think growing up here, both of our families are well known in Babinda. My dad, Ronnie Dewis, and mother, Dorothy Dewis, she was an Ambram. They're known locals. In my family, I'm the youngest of four as well. I've got an older sister, Virginia, a brother, Ronald, the next sister, Janelle, and then 8 years later, I came along as well. So I don't say I'm a surprise. I was planned, but just a little bit later. Growing up in Babinda, I think it really did set the foundations for me. It's such a strong community here. My dad was working in the sugar cane fields, and then he also worked with the council. My mum was a domestic worker as well, and growing up, they had that strong work ethic, and I think that's really what set the path for me as well growing up. And then as I got older, I finished school. I did a traineeship as well. I got my certificate, and then I ventured to Cairns for work. So yeah.
And from then to now, what's your job?
Yeah, so currently I'm the CEO of a family violence legal service, which is called Queensland Indigenous Family Violence Legal Service. We have 8 sites around Queensland. We have an office in Cairns. That's where our head office is based. We've also got an office in Townsville, Rockhampton, Mount Isa, in Brisbane. We've also got an office in Bamaga and on Thursday Island, and we service the majority of Queensland. So we will service clients right up to the Torres Strait Islands, and that's even to the international border with PNG, right down to Brisbane, along the east coast, and west out to Mount Isa and down to Rockhampton. So we cover a vast majority of Queensland. We outreach to over 80 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and we provide free legal support services, as well as we do education and awareness as well.
And your point of view on domestic violence?
Look, growing up, you knew of families who may have been dealing with domestic violence. You had it in your own family. And if I can say one thing, that domestic violence has no barriers. So it can be in families with low income, high income, different cultures, and it's all about behaviour, and it's changing that behaviour. And we're seeing currently now, I see just an increase in family violence, or domestic and family violence, and there are a number of I suppose, how can I say, strategies that or initiatives that the government's trying to implement, which I think are really good and are positive. There's this national plan that's just been released to end domestic and family violence. And from that national plan, they're also wanting to develop and then release or implement a First Nations plan as well, and an action plan. So that First Nations plan will be specifically tailored around addressing domestic and family violence for First Nations people. I'm very passionate about the work that we do, because, as I said, it's a behaviour, and so it's a behaviour that can be changed with the right tools and supports to help families to lead a healthier family structure and family life.
And the solutions to stop domestic violence?
Look, it's how can I explain it? Domestic violence, there's so many different layers to it, and we see it intersecting with homelessness, we see it intersecting with incarceration for both adults and youth. We see it also intersecting with overcrowding in homes, and so there's not sort of one solution. There's multiple solutions and at different layers. So it's dealing with homelessness, it's dealing with overcrowding, early intervention and prevention. So really trying to work earlier with families to address this behaviour, working more with men. It's still a very gendered way. It's all very gendered. Family violence. So there are men who are the victims, but generally it is women, and stats and data speak to that. So it's really about working with the family holistically, and that's what, with our organisation, we've also embedded a case management model. So what we're wanting to do there is really work with families holistically. So they might come to our organisation with a legal issue, but if they've got a housing issue, we'd like to support them to address that. If they need to speak to a counsellor, if they need to do some work together as a family unit. So it's really about how can we support these families currently now, with the legal issue or the situation they're in at that crisis moment, but then also changing that direction for them so they can lead a more healthier and empowered life. Yeah.
And when you said earlier about domestic violence is like an onion, has those different layers. So is those layers separated, or is it just the one, in the sense of young, old?
Yeah, no, look, we're even seeing a lot of youth, being abusive in relationships. I think also social media, also the age of technology has also increased violence in a sense. You'll see a lot of bullying that can be occurring, with posting of fights on social media, just in different aspects. But then you also, with just posting of videos and sharing of photos without consent. So I think technology has played a bit of, added a bit of, influenced, violence increasing a little bit. But also I think it comes back to, as I said, it's a behaviour, so it's something that's learned. So if it's a normal part of an upbringing for a young person, they're going to think that's a normal way of operating in a relationship. So if we can interject a little bit earlier and say, hold on, that's not normal, and say this is what a normal relationship should look like, hopefully we can then help youth to see that you can have disagreements. So we've got to realize that having a healthy relationship is not about having any disagreements. It's about the violence, the physical abuse, the financial abuse, the coercive control and intimidation. That's those behaviours that it's unhealthy. And so it's just about teaching young men and women that you can have healthy relationships that's not about abuse or violence.
And how can you said to stop it, put those into place, but how can you teach that to the young people on their level?
What we try to do is work with, as I mentioned before, we provide education. So we've got our case management officers trained as Love Bites facilitators, so they can then go out and provide basically what it's called is like an unhealthy or a healthy relationship education session. And we try to engage with schools and run those sessions with kids that are in like the high school age group, just to start showing them what is a healthy relationship. And hopefully there'll be some learnings or reflective thinking of those young kids saying, oh, maybe I've not been treated this person the right way, or I shouldn't have uploaded those photos without their consent, and just making them stop and realise that maybe that behaviour wasn't right or respectful.
And as you were saying, for the school, is there a way that they can contact you to have these sessions with our young people.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share our details.
Yeah.
We're currently funded to provide services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, so that's how we're funded. But we can do community events. We can, if there is a specific topic that a community would like us to address. So, for instance, even strangulation. So a lot of people in community aren't aware that strangulation is now a criminal offence. And so it's just creating that level of awareness for community so we can tailor education sessions to suit community as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that insight into domestic violence that some people are not aware of. And the youth, I'm scared for them.
Yeah.
Because they're young and silly and they think it's okay, but not realising the outcome of it. So like you said, there's things there to prevent that, but is there a really better way?
Oh, again, it's not just I suppose, a simple solution or answer, and you really have to understand the circumstances, I think, where youth are coming from. We have youth that may be, in a situation where there's overcrowding, like I mentioned before, in the house. So that will then impact them. And also if there's violence actually occurring in the house, they might want to be outside and not want to be at home, so they can get themselves caught up in other things. So, look, I think this is just me personally.
Yes. Yeah.
I think what youth are missing a lot today are real mentors.
Yep.
I see, like when we grew up, Rosie, when I know playing basketball, we had like Annie Annie's brother
Family,
Jackie, and he was a really good mentor in just being there with us at basketball. It kept us off the streets.
Yeah.
They were really engaged and connected with the youth. And I think you can tell whether or not somebody's genuinely interested in wanting to really mentor and encourage you and empower you. And I think for whatever reason, I think that's missing a lot with youth today. We've got a lot of youth that are in out-of-home care, so they don't even have their family connection.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that cultural identity is lost with a lot of our kids as well.
Yeah, and non-Indigenous children, I feel for them as well, because they haven't got that connection to their families, and we don't know their backgrounds, and people out there might say, oh, we know them, but they don't. We all come from different backgrounds, and I think it's about time now that the government should really take heed and listen to these young people. At the end of the day, they our future.
Well, that's right. They're a next generation.
Yeah, next generation, and if we could help them, please do. The government, if you're listening, help them because they deserve to be helped.
Yeah. I think they like I said, I see a lot that have lost their cultural identity as well, because if they're in out-of-home care and not even with any kin or any cultural connection, they're even losing their culture, let alone who they are and things like that. So it's a lot. I think we've got a long way to go yet in really addressing the issues around violence and youth and incarceration as well. I also, so just so you know, Queensland Indigenous Family Violence Legal Services is under the Family Violence Prevention Legal Services Program throughout Australia, and there are 16 of us nationally. I'm the chair of the national FEPLSs, and with that I sit on the Coalition of Peaks. So where I'm going with that is around the closing the gap and just providing a bit of information what that is. It's an agreement that whole of government have signed. So this is the states and territories as well as the Commonwealth government have signed an agreement with the National Coalition of Peaks. So that's all of 140 plus members of Aboriginal community controlled organisation and peak bodies. They've signed an agreement with them to address socio-economic targets. And family violence is one of those. It's Target 13. And so the Target 13 is around reducing family and domestic reducing it from 50% through down to zero and up until I think it's 2032. So, like I said, we've got a lot of work in trying to, reduce that, but it doesn't stop us from keeping up the fight and continuing on, because as you said, it's our future. If we don't look to try to address something now, it's our kids, it's the younger ones coming forward that are going to, have more challenges ahead of them.
Yeah, and domestic violence isn't okay. What can we do as a community if we see it?
Yeah, there's a number of things that you can do. Obviously, as you said, it's not to be tolerated. So you can, if you know of somebody in your family that's dealing with domestic and family violence, you have to be mindful, though, the reason why they may have not reported is because of safety issues. So you do have to be careful in a sense of how you address it. Maybe, hopefully, you can speak to them and you saying that you've identified that, it looks like that they've got some of these issues going on in their home. Is there any way I can help? You could also provide them with details of a service, a DV, a domestic and family violence service, a service like ours that can provide some legal support. It's also getting them connected with those services that if they do need to escape, they've got somewhere they can escape to. Because generally what we see is it's at that crisis point when they need help. So with COVID, we've seen a lot of underreporting of domestic and family violence because they had nowhere to go. So it was really difficult for them to report because we were all in lockdown. So where could they escape? So that's where I'm saying we just need to be mindful that, yes, we can't tolerate it, but also just bearing in mind the safety of the person who, may be living in that situation. There are other ways too. You can become an advocate and join, a DV service or something like that who's really calling out DV and domestic and family violence. I know White Ribbon for Men, they do a pledge against domestic and family violence. So it's men pledging that they don't tolerate domestic and family violence. But then also, you might even, like in a community such as Babinda, if you know that there are a few women that are in that challenging situation, you might just even form a women's group, and it's just being that support there for them, because we can't make them, we can't make them end that relationship. They've got to make that decision on their own. And generally what we see with the clients we service is that they don't want to end the relationship. They just want the violence to stop. So hopefully by creating some community support around awareness and education for both the victim and the perpetrator can help change that dynamic in the relationship.
Okay, thank you for that. Wynetta?
Thank you.
Netta?
Sorry, I can go on a bit. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
no,
talk
you're
too
good.
much.
No, I find it interesting because not many people know.
Yeah. I think I'm very passionate about it, so
it's good.
it's like, shut up.
Yeah. It's good. And proud of you doing that job for us. Yeah.
It's little bit by little bit. Though.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
And little bit by little bit, we're closing the gap.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and it's great. Great for everybody.
Yeah.
Domestic violence isn't okay.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and the message is, if you are in that situation, please seek help.
Yes.
And address it. Because this could lead to something worse.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And thank you for your time, Wynetta, again.
Breaking the Ice with Rosemary Ambrose.